It's 1981, and Mattel just lost the biggest toy license in history, Star Wars. The franchise that basically printed money for Kenner is now completely out of reach, and Mattel's executives are panicking because they need a replacement fast. But here's the thing, what they came up with wasn't just a replacement, it became something way bigger. A Barbarian action figure that would rewrite the rules of how toys, cartoons, and merchandising worked forever. But most people don't know that He-Man wasn't even supposed to exist. The whole thing started as a desperate attempt to salvage a completely different failed toy line. And what's even crazier is that the cartoon everyone remembers, that was actually illegal when it first aired. At least, that's what the FCC thought. Now let's rewind to 1976. Mattel had been making Barbie dolls for years, but they wanted a piece of the action figure market that Kenner was dominating with Star Wars. So they took a gamble on a property that seemed like a sure thing, Conan the Barbarian. They secured the rights and started developing a toy line, big muscular figures, swords, and sorcery, the whole sword and sandal aesthetic. They even built prototypes, but then the 1982 Conan movie came out and it was rated R, blood, violence, Arnold Schwarzenegger doing Arnold Schwarzenegger things. Mattel looked at their kid-friendly toy line and realized they had a massive problem. They couldn't market R-rated movie toys to children. The whole thing was dead in the water. But here's where it gets interesting. Mattel had already sunk serious money into the development. They had the sculpts, and they had the concept. They had the tooling as well. Designer Mark Taylor had created this incredible barbarian aesthetic with castles and creatures, and Mattel's management made a call that would change everything. They decided to file the serial numbers off, strip away the Conan branding, and create their own original barbarian hero. No movie license needed, no rating problems, a complete creative control. Mark Taylor went back to the drawing board and created He-Man. The name itself was genius in its simplicity. He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. You can't trademark generic words, but you can build a character around them. December 1981. Mattel launches Masters of the Universe with He-Man, Skeletor, Man-at-Arms, Beastman, and Merman. 5 figures, no cartoon, no comic book, just toys and some pack-in mini-comics to explain who these characters were. And it worked. Kind of. The toys sold okay, but they weren't the runaway hit Mattel needed. Kids liked them, but without a show or a movie, He-Man just, was another action figure competing with Star Wars and G.I. Joe. But Mattel had learned something important from Star Wars. Kenner's toys exploded because the kids saw the movie first. They wanted to be Luke Skywalker. Now the media came first, then the toys followed. So Mattel did something very unprecedented. They decided to make their own cartoon, not to adapt to an existing property, not to promote a movie, but just to sell the toys. An entire animated series designed from the ground up as a 22-minute commercial, and they partnered up with Filmation, which is an animation studio known for working fast and cheap. Now Lou Scheimer, the founder, also saw the potential immediately, but Filmation was struggling financially, and a guaranteed toy-backed series meant stability. But there was a big problem. In the 1970s, the FCC had strict rules about children's television. You couldn't just make shows that were just advertisement for products. There were limits on how much commercial content could air during kids' programming, and the whole point was to protect children from being manipulated by advertisers. So how did He-Man get on air? The answer is Ronald Reagan. So when Reagan took office in '81, his administration began deregulating everything, including children's television. The new FCC chairman, Mark Fowler, believed that the market should regulate itself, and if parents didn't like the show, they wouldn't let their kids watch it. Simple as that. So this created a massive loophole. Suddenly, toy companies could produce entire animated series that were basically extended toy commercials, and the FCC wouldn't stop them. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe became one of the first shows to exploit this new landscape. Filmation produced 65 episodes for the 1983 season. That was the magic number for the syndication. You could air different episodes every weekday for 13 weeks and then start over. The show aired in the afternoon, right when kids got home from school, and it was everywhere: independent stations, local affiliates, Saturday mornings, He-Man was inescapable. Now here's what made He-Man brilliant. Every episode followed the same structure, but it worked. Prince Adam, the seemingly weak and cowardly son of King Randor, would encounter a problem, something would threaten Castle Grayskull or even the people of Eternia, and then Adam would hold up his sword and shout the most iconic transformation sequence in 80s television. "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power!" Lightning would strike, his clothes would change, and his pet tiger Cringer would become a battle cat, and suddenly, Prince Adam was He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. The transformation was genius marketing. Kids didn't just want He-Man, they wanted Prince Adam too. They wanted the sword, they wanted the battle cat. Each episode introduced new characters, new vehicles, and new playsets, and Mattel would have these toys on shelves within months. But Filmation added something that Mattel didn't expect. At the end of every episode, He-Man or one of his friends would turn into the camera and deliver a moral lesson. Today we learned that it's important to tell the truth. Remember, being different doesn't make someone bad. These PSA segments became iconic. They also gave Filmation and Mattel cover against critics who said the show was just a toy commercial. Look, we're teaching valuable lessons to children. This is educational content. I mean, it was brilliant, and it did work. Now, Christmas 1983. He-Man toys are the hottest thing on the market, but one item stood above everything else: Castle Grayskull. The playset was massive, 2 feet tall, detailed sculpting that looked like a giant skull fortress. It came with a working drawbridge, a trapdoor, and then also secret compartments and enough play features to keep kids entertained for hours. And it retailed for about $30, which in 1983 was serious money for a toy. And for context, most action figures costed about $3 to $4, but Castle Grayskull costed as much as 10 figures, and it sold out everywhere. Parents were driving from store to store trying to find one. Toy stores had waiting lists, and Mattel couldn't manufacture them fast enough, and it became one of those legendary toy shortages that defined 80s childhoods. But here's something most people don't know. Castle Grayskull's design came directly from the rejected Conan line. Mark Taylor had created a skull-themed fortress for the Conan toys, and when Mattel pivoted to He-Man, they just repurposed the design. The green and purple color scheme, that was a cost-saving measure. Those colors required fewer paint applications than more detailed coloring. But it became iconic. You can see a Castle Grayskull from across a toy store. Now, He-Man's success didn't go unnoticed. By 1984, every toy company wanted their own He-Man. Hasbro relaunched G.I. Joe as the 3.75-inch line and gave them an animated series. Kenner created Mask, vehicles that transformed and hid secret weapons. Coleco tried to compete with Rambo action figures, which was an insane thing to do because Rambo was an R-rated movie about Vietnam War PTSD. But the biggest threat came from an unexpected place: Hasbro's Transformers. Now, Transformers launched in 1984 with the same model: toys first, cartoon second, all designed to sell more toys. But Transformers had something He-Man didn't. The toys themselves had a play pattern built in. They transformed. You didn't need other toys to have fun. One Optimus Prime could entertain the kid for hours, and He-Man required collecting. You needed He-Man and Skeletor and Battle Cat and Castle Grayskull. Transformers worked alone or together. Mattel responded by expanding their Masters of the Universe line aggressively, with new heroes, new villains, new creatures, new vehicles, and by 1985, there were over 70 different He-Man products available, but they were spreading themselves thin. And in 1985, Mattel made a bold move. They launched She-Ra, Princess of Power, a spin-off focused on He-Man's long-lost twin sister, and the goal was obvious. He-Man dominated the boys' action figure market, but girls weren't buying He-Man toys. Barbie still controlled that demographic, and Mattel wanted to create an action figure line that actually would appeal to girls in the same way. She-Ra was brilliant, same universe as He-Man, same animation studio, same distribution model, but the characters were designed for girls. She-Ra had long flowing hair, her friends included magical princesses and talking horses. The villains were less monstrous and more fashionably evil. And it worked. She-Ra became the best-selling girls action figure line of the 1980s. It outsold He-Man in several markets, and the cartoon ran for 93 episodes, more than He-Man's original run. But here's the thing nobody talks about. She-Ra proved that girls wanted action figures. They didn't just want dolls. They wanted heroes with swords and adventures and battles between good and evil. Toy companies had been ignoring that market for decades, and Mattel accidentally cracked the code. August 7, 1987, Masters of the Universe, the motion picture hits theaters. Mattel had been planning this for years. A live-action He-Man movie starring Dolph Lundgren, fresh off of Rocky IV, Frank Langella as Skeletor, directed by Gary Goddard, produced by Canon Films. Now on paper, it should have worked, but in reality, it was a disaster. Now the movie barely takes place on Eternia. Instead, He-Man and his friends get transported to Earth through a cosmic key. Now, most of the film is set in a small California town, and the budget was slashed during production. The script was rewritten multiple times, and the whole thing felt cheap despite costing $22 million at the time. Critics hated it. Rogers Ebert gave it a 2-star rating, and Variety called it a colossal bore. But the worst part? Kids didn't care either. The movie made $17 million domestically against its $22 million budget, and it was a box office bomb, and it killed any plans for sequels. But here's the weird thing. Over time, the movie developed a cult following. People appreciate Frank Langella's genuinely menacing Skeletor performance, and the cosmic key concept influenced later sci-fi. Now the practical effects hold up better than you'd actually expect. It's a bad movie, but it's an interesting bad movie. And by 1987, He-Man was everywhere. And that was the problem. Market saturation. Every kid who wanted He-Man toys already had them. Stores were overflowing with unsold inventory, and the cartoon had been in syndication for 4 years. The novelty was gone. Mattel tried to revive interest with He-Man, The New Adventures in 1989, a brand new look, new setting, where He-Man travels to the future planet Primus to fight Skeletor in space. Now it failed spectacularly. The new designs alienated longtime fans, and kids didn't connect with the new sci-fi setting. Retailers were still stuck with the old He-Man inventory and refused to order new product, and the show was cancelled after 65 episodes. The toy line died shortly after, and by 1991, Masters of the Universe was dead. Mattel discontinued the entire line. He-Man had lasted less than a decade from launch to cancellation, and for context, G.I. Joe ran from 1982 all the way up to 1994, and Transformers is still going, but He-Man burned bright and fast. So what happened? In 2002, Mattel tried again with a new He-Man cartoon on Cartoon Network. Better animation, more complex storytelling, redesigned characters that respected the originals while modernizing them. And it was actually good. Critics ended up loving it, fans loved it, and it didn't matter. Cartoon Network moved the show's time slot constantly. Toy distribution was a mess, and the show was cancelled after 2 seasons despite strong creative reception. Then in 2021, Netflix launched Masters of the Universe Revelation, which is a sequel series to the original 1980 show. Kevin Smith produced it, and it became instantly controversial for killing He-Man in the first episode and focusing on Teela. Now the discourse around that show revealed something important. People care deeply about He-Man. Even decades later, this toy commercial from the Reagan-era still means something to millions of people. Because here's the truth. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe changed everything. It proved that toy companies could create their own media properties. It showed that syndication could reach more kids than network television. And it demonstrated that boys and girls wanted action-oriented toys. Every toy-based cartoon that followed owes something to He-Man. Transformers, G.I. Joe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you have Pokemon, Beyblades, all of them used the He-Man model. Toys first, media second, build a universe that sells products. Now the original He-Man toys are collectibles now, and a mint condition Castle Grayskull can sell for thousands of dollars. Rare figures from the later waves command serious money. and the mini comics as well that came with early figures are valuable pieces of 80s nostalgia. But the real legacy isn't the collectibles. It's the proof that you can actually build an entire fictional universe designed specifically to sell toys, and if you did it right, kids would love it anyway. He-Man wasn't just a product, it was a genuine part of 80s childhood. And it all started because Mattel lost the Star Wars license and refused to let a failed Conan toy go to waste.